Jeremy from Jeremy.net. So, as I mentioned a few videos ago, I've got a piece that I've been working on that I'm still not finished with because I'm just not happy with the way that it's been coming out. So I'm going to take you back a little bit because this is a few months ago, and this is me doing what I thought was the last of my color thumbnails. And I've introduced this process a while ago, doing color thumbnails in watercolor, to just work out my general color scheme before I go into doing the finished piece. And the fact of the matter is I could just as easily do this in Photoshop, do it digitally, and I could work through a lot more variations, possibly quicker. But I enjoy the tactile sensation of doing it in watercolor. I haven't been doing as much traditional painting for several years now, so I find it very comforting to sit here with a watercolor sketchbook and just thumbnail out, sketching out some different little color swatches, color palettes. And now we dive into the meat of this. This is what I thought was going to be the layout phase for the final drawing. And I'm using a bit of what I learned from environmental artist and architectural illustrator John Messer. I had taken his environmental drawing class a few years back. No, not a few years back. A year ago. Wow, God, I'm really loopy today. I learned a lot from that class, a tremendous amount in terms of drawing illustrations and creating a true sense of environment. Now, learning how to do it and being able to execute it are two different things, as we'll see. But my big goal here, one of the big takeaways I took away from his class, was how to genuinely create a sense of space through the simple rules of perspective. So right here, really what I'm trying to do is define a box and define where the viewer's eye line is within that box, and then fill that box with objects, and then convert those objects, to fill that box with smaller boxes, and then convert those boxes into objects. Now the piece here is going to be a blacksmith standing at a forge holding a sword. So just figuring out how tall I wanted the fireplace in the back to be. That's what the arch is that you see that's roughly laid in. And even now, looking at this, I don't know if it's... I'll have to go back and look at the original drawing. I don't know if it's that the perspective is off in the drawing or just that the camera is creating distortions. The camera that I'm using to actually record this video. Because as I'm looking at it now, I'm seeing how the perspective is slightly off, and it's just driving me crazy because I want to reach into the video and fix it. It just feels like everything is sort of slouching to one side. But the more I'm looking at this as I'm filling in details, I'm thinking that it's more of the camera being off-center, looking at me drawing, than it is being that bad. I mean, there's definitely problems with it that I'll get into. Like even in here, the fact that I just drew that brazier, that bowl that's going to be holding hot coals. I'm looking at that, and it's way too much of a down shot for the perspective that I have. You should be looking much more at the side of it. And I don't remember whether in the rough sketch I was just kind of ballparking in where the upper part of it's going to be, because that's about where the coals end up taking space. But in terms of the ring that's supposed to make the top, that looks absolutely god-awful. But yeah, I'm just going through here and slowly blocking in the elements of the room. And I'm doing all of this before getting to any of the figures. That's the point where I was like, oh wait, the brazier is horrible. See, I knew I had to have some point said, wait, this just is not working. It's way out of perspective with everything else in there. And I'm glad to see that I did that here in this video. Because, again, I shot this a few months back. I don't really remember all the details I was thinking when I was drawing it. But my main goal here at the start was to get the back of the room, the floor, and then getting the anvil. That's sort of the centerpiece to this. So, and then slowly drawing in the details. Anchoring the sort of like the corners, whether there's going to be support beams going through the room, working out all these little things, keep them all within this simple perspective, which, it's kind of narrow and tight, but knowing that the figure is going to be staying there and he's going to be more of a vertical figure, this room eventually does end up fitting what I lay down for the character that's going to be standing in it. But it seems sort of peculiar when I'm drawing it without any figure at all, when I'm just drawing the room. And I think a lot of the time here, my struggle is to make this room feel more fitting. Even as I'm looking at this now with me going back and drawing it back in, I'm still feeling like the angle of that brazier is bothering me. But then I start drawing in the coals on top of it, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's just that I made the object way too deep. Like it's almost like a long bathtub instead of a circular dish there. So, hey, that might be one of the things. If I just fix that, the whole piece would come together. No, that's not true, because you'll see I come back and I take another pass at this and do the layouts all over again. But I think that's sort of the challenge, is drawing a room that has an interesting composition. And if that room, the actual just layout of this room with no objects in it, feels like it has interesting compositional layouts, like compositional ley lines in terms of where the floor is, the wall, the ceiling and walls. There's only one ceiling. But laying those things out in a way that's visually interesting, you're already on the road to having a piece as an interesting composition if the environment is its own composition. Almost as if you were going to do like a landscape painting and you drew like a really nice, badass landscape, and then you started painting in a dragon or an army or, I don't know, a wood nymph like carrying a machete running through the forest. Whatever you were going to add to it. The wood nymph thing, it's not a bad idea. But whatever you're going to add to the piece, if you can make the environment that is going to contain the illustration, the figural element, if you can make that environment interesting, you're already well on your way to having an interesting looking piece. And part of the things that I go back and change in this is I go back and I end up redrawing the environment, the room completely. Because in this one, him being a blacksmith, you'll see as I get to it eventually, when I start decorating the walls, I cover it with swords, shields, hammers, various types of weapons, some blacksmithing tools, and it's almost like I was trying to use that wall trying to use the weapons on the wall as a grid device. Because when we design with a grid, it's very helpful for helping us convey perspective. Whether it's a pattern of bricks or tile on a floor or stone, that grid pattern helps you show how the surface is moving forward and backward in space. And you don't necessarily always have to do that with tiles or bricks. You can do that with objects attached to the wall. And that's what I tried to use the wall to convey in this piece, as you'll see when I add details in there. And I think one of the things that I'm struggling with in this illustration is trying to make the elements that I was passionate about, the elements that made me want to create this piece, to try and make them prominent enough that they carry the weight of what I'm trying to express. What I mean by that is that you can see this sword, it's got the words art written on it. And in the final piece, the plan is to have the words, have it like a glowing sword, and the area that has the words is extra hot. Or I may do it where the whole sword is glowing and then those words are cool. And I still haven't decided yet, but originally my plan was to have them extra hot because I wanted the sword to already have a glow of its own to it. It's being hammered on this forge, and the hammer says passion on it, and what I'll end up putting into the anvil at the end is creativity, because these are the ingredients that it takes to forge art. And this piece really is, it's a struggle for two reasons. It's a struggle because I'm trying to level up to challenge myself to do something that's harder than what I usually do. I tend to do something simple, just a handful of figures, minimal suggestion of background. You can create very compelling artwork in that manner. It's easy, it's simple and straightforward, but you can still create very compelling images without having to load your pieces with detail. What I'm trying to do is learn how to not overwhelm the page with mindless detail, but to overwhelm it with details that are expressive, that add to the story. I'm trying to add complexity to the work, which is different than just detail. Detail can be useful and communicative, but detail can also be noodling. It can be a waste of time. It can be just adding things. And I've done a video where I discuss the difference between noodling versus actual detail. And the challenge for me is that I am a noodler. Throughout most of my life, I tend to just draw, or I would just draw the thing that was interesting to me. Like I would, in this case, it'd be the blacksmith and the sword and the anvil. And then everything else would just be sort of, maybe you'd get the suggestion of the walls and a bunch of scribbles. Anything that wasn't particularly pertinent to the detail of the story I was trying to tell would just be sketches of like shadow shapes or cool lines that felt like detail but didn't really say anything. That's very, very different from complexity. And things can be overly complex as well. So I don't want to say that the word complex always has positive connotations as well. But generally, complexity in my mind feels like it has more of a purpose. And in this piece, I'm trying to give everything, I'm trying to level up the amount of complexity that I put into a piece. And I will say that looking at this now, I am happy with what I tried to put in there. That each one of these, the weapons, the spears, these hooks, all these things, they convey the world. But I eventually went through and did another thumbnail that you'll see down the road that's much simpler, and it's closer to what I usually tend to do, where the background is just vaguely suggested. And what I need to figure out now is how to bring that to fruition in the final piece, to do something that does have both simplicity and complexity at the same time. It's weaving in and out of those two different ideas. Like a simple form holding complex detail. That's kind of where this piece ends up going. And I'm still not there yet, because like I said, I'll take this drawing all the way to completion. I do another one, and it may be that I may go back not just to redrawing the final drawing, but I may go back to thumbnailing again, color thumbnailing again, and this time I may try to do a lot more tone and value and do a tonal pencil drawing before going into the final drawing. And I've actually shied away a lot from doing very finished drawings with value. Most of my drawings, when they're complete, are just line art because I leave them what's called open line, which is I don't tend to put shadows in there and dark details. And I tend to leave them open line because I color most of my work digitally these days. And when you've got a lot of shadow in there, you can end up having a lot of stuff that gets in the way of coloring the piece digitally, unless you end up not using the line art, but so much as painting over it, using it as a guideline. And I've seen lots of people that have very successful results by painting through a piece, painting completely over it. Like they treat it the same way you would if you had a rough drawing on a canvas and were painting on top of it. They do the same thing digitally, where by the time that you get to the end of the piece, all of the line art that would have been visible in that original drawing is obliterated. But it's obliterated by color and shape and volume and edge work, And that's, I'm still making up my mind about how I want to tackle those things in the future. Because I definitely feel more like when I do these pieces, the final ones, I feel like I'm coloring a drawing, whether it's a pencil drawing or an inkline drawing, as opposed to doing a full-blown painting. And, maybe it's worthwhile for me to dive in and try doing a full-blown digital painting, where at the end all the line work is gone, and what you get is edge work in a finished piece. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these videos, please like and share them. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter to get a free digital comic at newsletter.jeremy.net. That's newsletter.gerimi.net. Also, visit my main website, jeremy.net, where you can buy my comic books, art prints, and more. There's also links to my Instagram, Twitter, and other social media accounts. That's it for now. Go be creative.